If you had a narcissistic parent, number one, you were robbed. Remember, you were robbed. You're going to hear gaslighting and validating statements from people when you say this one. Say, everyone has a tough child. Wrong. Nobody has a perfect family, but a narcissistic parent is a special kind of hell. It's decades of day-to-day invalidation, meanness, pettiness, manipulation, gaslighting. This is the stuff that damages a soul from the inside out. And yes, you were robbed, because every child deserves a childhood full of unconditional love and acceptance, of a parent who sees and who values them, of a parent who is not selfish and egocentric, of a parent who has empathy and can put a child's needs first. If you didn't get those things, you were robbed. And that knowing that can fill you with resentment, grief, regret, and rage. There are no second chances on childhood. And to not get this is to have been stolen or robbed of a fundamental need in life. From the top.
There's what, 4 different types of narcissism?
I'd say probably closer to 6, but we can go with 4. Yeah.
What are the?
So 4, I would say grandiose, which is the traditional arrogant, pretentious, charming, charismatic, kind of shiny narcissist. That's your kind of prototype of the narcissist. There's the vulnerable narcissist. This is probably, to me, the most compelling form of narcissism, because this is where you see the sullenness, the petulance, the passive aggression, the chronic victimhood, the social anxiety, the failure to launch. These are people who live in fantasies of the great things they're going to do, but they never do them.
Wow.
The grandiose people actually often do get them done. They will talk the big game and they'll kind of do the big game.
So the vulnerable doesn't mean they're actually intimate and vulnerable with you.
No.
It means that
they themselves are vulnerable,
game, but they don't actually take action.
Correct. And they keep
telling everyone, I'm going to do this project or this thing.
And you know why I couldn't do it? Because that guy didn't give me the money, and that guy was scammed me, and that everyone takes advantage of me, and that person stole my idea. That's that.
The vulnerable. Okay.
The vulnerable. Okay. Then there's the malignant. Now, to me, the malignant narcissist is the most severe form of narcissism. And that's when we talk about stuff like the dark tetrad. And the dark tetrad is composed of narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, the willingness to take advantage of other people, and sadism. And I also believe paranoia sits in there too, right? So in malignant narcissism, we're talking about people who are more coercive, who are more menacing, who are more isolating. This feels a little bit more like psychopathy, but it's still narcissism, and that's much more severe, okay? Then we have the communal narcissists. Communal. And these are the folks who so all narcissistic folks need validation. The communal narcissistic folks are interesting because they get their validation by being perceived as saviors, rescuers, and do-gooders.
Like cult leaders or more?
That's a severe. So a cult leader would be a communal malignant narcissist. That would be.
Okay.
So
wow,
these are like cocktails, right?
Jeez.
These are like you move you put it all together.
Wow.
So at the extreme, a communal malignant narcissist, cult leader. But some communal narcissists could be a mother who does all the activities and the PTA and helps the little league and raises the money and goes to the galas and goes home and screams at her kids and is horrible and abuses her partner.
But on the surface, it looks like
they think she's a saint amongst us. It's the person who walks around and everyone thinks they're a humanitarian, and people are like, no, I worked for their nonprofit, and like it was absolutely a hellscape, right?
Yeah, when you look behind the curtain, you see
bingo. So that's the communal narcissist. So they get validation by the sense of, look what a good person they are. They're rescuing puppies and they're doing this thing and they're raising all this money and they're so good.
But behind the scenes, they're not.
Not. So it's not saying if people do nice things are communal narcissists.
Sure.
It's that they continue to have the lack of empathy, entitlement, all that other stuff.
So it's like you can, because I'm like, okay, well, I want to build a community and serve people. So how do you build a community? You've got a big audience.
Yeah.
Like, how do we build communities without that becoming a thing? Is it just because if you're not consistent with service all around you in your relationships, then you're more...
So, are you being mean to other people?
Got
so, like,
you.
if I was...
Public facing, you look like the best thing ever, but behind the scenes...
Exactly. So you're mean to your partner. You're
see.
Mean to your family. You're mean to your people who work.
You're inconsistent.
You're consistent. You're consistently mean to the people who are behind the curtain. You're consistently sort of putting on a show in front of the curtain.
Yeah, but you're not consistent on both ways.
No, and that's
like
that's
service
what it is.
mindset.
Yeah.
Okay,
communal. And then there's the self-righteous narcissist. And the self-righteous narcissist is judgmental, moralistic, rigid. They're often funky with money. They will, this would be a kind of person who has so much money, and someone in their family has a hardship. They had a job loss, and then their kid needs medical care, and they'll say, well, I didn't create this situation, so I guess you'll have to figure it out.
They have no heart.
Like, it feels like no
Yeah.
heart, but there's also this really rigid judgmental, and they judge people from the sense of, well, look at all I built. I guess I must have worked hard. They'll never account for their luck, right? Or sometimes their absence of bad luck, that kind of thing. They will say, if they say dinner's at 6 and you show up at 6:30 because your kid got sick, they'll say, I'm sorry, we already ate. So it feels very
Cold.
rigid, cold, moralistic, miserly, obsessive. These are people who are often workaholics and with little care for how it would affect anyone. It's like, there's workaholics out there who check in on other people, like, I'm going to make time for you.
Sure.
Or and we're taking a vacation when this is done, whatever. And they're communicating, and people are aware, okay, they're doing this so we could buy the house or whatever.
So is it possible to be self-righteous and not be a narcissist then?
I don't think you can ever be self-righteous and healthy, because I think if you're self-righteous, you're like, I'm better than you.
Gotcha.
Right. So you'll even see self-righteous narcissism in some of these kinds of exercise zealots who are like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and then I milk my goat and I make a smoothie and then I do 1,000 crunches and run 10 million miles and then I work and then I journal and then I this and I sleep at 8 o'clock. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, is there no other human being in your life? Like, how do you deal with a crying sister? I tell her to go to hell and I drink more goat milk. It's that can be and the reason I'm in shape and I'm going to live to be 179 years old is because I do all this and you don't, you lazy, awful person. That's self-righteous.
Lacking compassion, lacking understanding,
It's lack
awareness.
of awareness of others. So that self-righteousness is sort of where the lack of empathy sits, right? So I don't think you can be I don't think there's good self-righteousness. I don't think all self-righteous people are narcissistic. But many people have said to me that self-righteous narcissism is really what happened in their family of origin. It was apparent. So there would almost be this unrealistic expectation that the child would adhere to rigid, obsessive rules like, don't touch this, don't do this, don't sit there, eat like this. And so the kid never got to be a kid.
Okay. Number 6?
And number 6 would be more of a neglectful narcissist. So these are the people who they view everyone as object. So coffee cup, whatever. And they just neglect them until they need them.
They just discard them. Or they just don't give them attention or energy, or
they don't have to give them attention. They don't attune to them. When a person around them is struggling, they won't care. It's
a lack of empathy.
It's a lack of empathy, but it's a lack of, like, for example, a malignant or a grandiose narcissist might actually get mad at someone. Like, oh my gosh, like, why do you keep talking to me? And people in relationships with neglectful narcissists will say, I'll take it, because at least that person was listening. But people in these relationships will literally feel like they're losing their minds because the person with them is literally not noticing them unless they need something from them.
Wow. So they're giving the cold shoulder. They don't speak to them for days, whatever it might be.
They just don't notice. They don't care. They won't know. Like, you might say, like, I have the biggest presentation of the year next week. They won't even ask.
Wow. It's all about them.
It's all about them, but in this weird way, and they don't even take notice of other people. So it is people who I've known clients in this experience, and they'll say, it's as though I didn't exist. But then when I had the piece of information or something they needed, I existed. So you feel like a really neglected personal assistant.
Oh my gosh.
In a narcissistic family cult, feedback is treated as an insult, not an opportunity for growth. These families don't resolve conflicts, they cut people off instead. The more you try to address issues, the more you're labeled as the enemy. Expressing your needs or problems is twisted into accusations of being ungrateful, as they defensively shift blame to avoid accountability. Any attempt to communicate is dismissed as unnecessary drama or picking a fight, leaving you feeling silenced. Over time, members start to believe that having an opinion is rude or rebellious, but the real issue isn't a lack of communication. It's their inability to comprehend the harm they're causing. For them, maintaining control is more important than understanding or connection.
There is argument inside of the psychiatric literature about this. I'm going with the people like Hare who say they need to be criminal. If there's no criminality, I don't really believe we're talking about psychopathy. It's boundary breaking. It's very, very goal focused. It's Machiavellian, which means they believe the end justifies the means. So you could say, well, where's the lack of empathy? We should be talking about the cruelty. I think the cruelty and the lack of empathy is secondary to a worldview that says the end justifies the means. I matter. You don't matter. You don't matter. You are not, you are just object. I am subject, and subject is all that there is. Are they cruel? Absolutely. Do they lack empathy? Well, of course they do. Are you empathic to your lawnmower? To your microwave? To them, we are things. Everybody else is a thing. Yes, there is a lack of empathy. Yes, there will be cruelty, but it's downstream of the fact that they just don't really see people as people. They are the only person. So that's why I called the book I wrote A Cult of One. They truly delusionally believe they are the central focus of the universe, just like a 2-year-old would, because it's an infantile defense mechanism. This, of course, will show up as blind ambition, which is relevant. The blind ambition is relevant when we're considering the superstructures that are created. So we have these conversations about the state of the world, politics, corporations, the lack of empathy, the chaos, the destruction to people and to the environment. And I personally find it all a little bit frustrating because it seems to be coming from an entrained form of naivety, as though we are pretending that the people who are in control of these things are just like everybody else. So nowadays, one of the big issues is identity politics, and we start dividing people up based on ethnicity, based on sexuality, based on age, based on gender. This, I believe, is a trick. It's a trick, a magician's trick, to get you to look away from the most important dividing line. The most important dividing line is between human beings and narcissistic psychopaths. Worrying about all the other dividing lines is a way of creating confusion and creating control. It's a way of controlling. When you're stuck in these debates and you start thinking this way, please remember that. The dividing line is not men and women. The dividing line is not national. It's not this country versus that. That is a trick. It is between narcissistic psychopaths and everyone else. And they are a minority of the population. But if it's 1 to 5%, because some people now will say, oh, it's about 30%. I really, really don't think that's a useful way to frame things. I think people have developed narcissistic traits. It's 1 in 5%. But then people say, well, why would the world look like this if it's 1 to 5%? Well, it would look like this if you extrapolate into the millions. That's hundreds of thousands of die-hard narcissistic psychopaths. Say the UK is 66 million. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of die-hard narcissistic psychopaths who inside of that system, it doesn't matter if it's the local office, the local laboratory, the local hospital, or local government. They are the ones who want to take control because blind ambition. They want to be in control. They have that delusional sense of entitlement that tells them, I should be the one who's in control. When we're talking about these things, or you see people debating it on the news or on podcasts, this is where my frustration comes from. Why aren't we talking about narcissistic psychopathy? Why are we talking as though, yeah, this good-natured person over there is just trying to fix a problem? No. Be cynical. Stop with the naivety. Be cynical. These are not good people. They're in that position of power largely because they believe that they should be. Could you imagine the arrogance of that? Imagine I take control of the United Kingdom, which we're about 18 months away from, my benevolent dictatorship. Just be patient, brothers and sisters, it's coming. But the arrogance and the entitlement to say, I know how 66 million people should live. I know. I have the solution. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the light. Pure, grandiose psychopathy. It's not possible. Think about it. So if you have a multiplicity of human beings with all of our limitations and all of our flaws, I couldn't even tell you how the 22 people in this room should live. Extrapolate that out to 66 million. I have no fucking chance whatsoever. And yet it's normal. It's normal. Yeah, this dude, this woman, she says she knows how we should sound. Yeah, let's get behind that. It's insane. But we do it because we've always done it. We do it because our parents did it. And they did it because their parents did it. But it doesn't make sense anymore. If you go back, not that far, you go back to World War I and think about how much information people in this country would be exposed to in World War I. How limited it would have been compared to now. Where are they getting their information from? It's not 3 steps away from the town crier who comes and tells you what the news is of the next village at midday every day. It's very, very limited. We don't have that excuse. We do have the excuse of being able to say that we're overwhelmed by the complexity. We do have that excuse. Like, we are being hit with a huge amount of information, which we are not a good evolutionary match for. And it shows. It shows. People are confused, they're agitated, they're anxious, they're depressed. And some of that is just information overload. So even if it is only 1 to 5% of humans, which I think it probably is, that's still easily enough to overwhelm a system and to create total systemic collapse across a long enough timeline. So if you have high degrees of pathology inside of a system, if the system is interconnected, where the narcissistic people hold positions of power, their behaviors and decision-making can have ripple effects throughout the entire system. Does that make sense? You have a highly narcissistic, highly psychopathic person at the top of an interconnected system. Their pathology, their worldview will be a contagion throughout the whole system. This is what I think we're struggling with now. People say, why is there an explosion of narcissistic traits at the moment? Some people say an explosion of narcissism. It really isn't an explosion of narcissistic personality disorder just yet. It could be. It's because the people who are in charge of how we view the world, they create the ideology. They create the how we know what is true. So another way of saying that would be the reality tunnel, the frame of reference. Who's creating our frames of reference? We argue inside of frames of reference without questioning what the frames of reference are. That's a human software fault. It's nobody's fault. It just comes with the territory. A frame of reference is given. A really good way of brainwashing people and controlling people is to give them a choice within a given context without describing the context itself. Would you like red or blue? I guess I need to choose red and blue. How about asking why I've only got these 2 fucking choices? And who set this system up? No, I asked you red or blue. That's a really easy way to confuse people. And it's not natural, I don't think, or spontaneous for most people to say, well, where's this question coming from? Who created the context for this question? So my suggestion, my hypothesis, my claim would be the ideological coordinates that we're faced with on a daily basis, from the moment you open your eyes, are narcissistic and psychopathic because they're created by narcissistic psychopaths.